I'm starting the recording. So this is the average per transaction, but what we need to find out is the average for every customer. So we right click, select new quick measure. We select average per category. And like I was saying earlier, the reason that this is the number one option on Power BI itself should convince you how important this is, right? I mean, literally, this is one of the first things that you do when you're creating measures. So what is the base value? That is my sales. What is my category? Can anybody tell me what should be the category here? So it says the category in which you want to calculate the average. What should it be?
Region.
No.
Distinct customer ID.
The customer ID or the customer name, not the region. Let me explain why. See, when I come back to my Excel, you will notice that the region is just an option. If I want to not see the region, I can select something else. I can remove my region and I can put my segment also, correct? The region is just temporary. The region is just an analysis that I'm doing, right? But what we are interested in finding out is the total of every customer here, right? So that's where you have to be very careful. The category says, is the category in which you want to calculate the average. Are we calculating the average of the regions? No. We are first calculating the average of all the total of my customer, correct? So we'll put our customer ID in this, press OK. First, let's look at the measure that has been created. It's a very simple measure. It says average X. Remember, this is not an average, not an average if. In Excel, you have average and you have average if. But here you have something called average X. What average X basically does is, it says that it calculates the average, which is the same average as Excel, of a set of expressions evaluated over a table. That means, what is the first argument? The table. What is the second argument? The expression. So what is my table here? My table here is something called values. That means values will only show you every single customer individually. Do you see the explanation of value? It says, when a column name is given in values, it will return a single column table of unique values, right? It's basically like a distinct list of items. And once I've done this, then what calculation am I doing? I'm calculating the sum of my sales value. So basically, how do I interpret this in proper English? I would say that first I created a list of all my customer IDs, which is this. And then for every single customer ID, I found the sum of sales amount, which is what we wanted. And after finding this, then I did the average of those numbers, right? And now when I put this inside the same column chart, you would notice that if I put this in values, now we get this, right? So do you see this 1055, 1005, 763 and 795? So 1055, 763, 1005 and 795, like this. Again, why is this important? Because for a company, they want to look at both perspectives. By looking at the blue one, the light blue, they will understand which region has the highest average transaction size. Which one is it? Very clearly, it is South region. But if you look at the average ticket size for every customer, then West is actually the best, which is at 1055. Any questions before I come to Tableau and show you how the same thing is done on Tableau? See, this will take a few attempts. If you're expecting that you will understand this the first time, you will not. Not because the calculation is difficult. The calculation is very simple. But the logic you will really have to understand. You know, what is the difference between average of every record versus the average of only the customer name? And the best part is, if I remove my region and if I keep my order date here, what will happen? Now it will tell me that for 2013, 14, 15 and 16, do you see the pattern, everyone? 242, 223, 235, 220. That means that every year, my average transaction size is actually not increased. See, it decreased, then it increased a little bit, then it decreased again. But the good sign is that the average of all my customer ticket sizes are increasing every year, right? You know, so for example, as a good analyst, if I give you this, what would you say? What would be your first interpretation of this number? If I'm saying that the average of sales is almost the same, it is not increasing, average of every transaction, okay, but the average per customer is increasing. What significance does this have for a business?
Customers are being loyal to the brand and they're purchasing more.
Customers are being loyal. See, but loyalty is a reflection of whether the customer is purchasing every year or not, right? Here we are not assessing whether the same. How do we know whether these are the same customers or not? Maybe these are different
It
customers.
means that customers are making more transactions, but the per transaction, sales are less.
Exactly. Very good. This is, see, let me answer the first one. Somebody said, Havish, these are customers who are loyal. I can't say that. You know why? It is possible that these customers who were there in 2014, everybody left the company and these were new customers. See, by looking at this, loyalty is not something I can find out, correct? If I want to find out the loyalty, I'll find out the sales from new customer. But what are we doing here? We are actually telling that even though the average transaction size has remained flat, it has not increased or decreased. Because the total is increasing, that means that customers are purchasing more from us. The size of transactions are not increasing, but the amount that every customer is purchasing is increasing. That basically means what? Customers are purchasing more transactions. That's what it means, right? Again, is it a good or a bad sign for a business? It depends, because is it clear now? Any questions, anyone?
Sorry to interrupt you, sir, but I was about to say that does this also means that number of customers are also increasing? This can also be an explanation to the.
I can't. See, that's what I'm saying. Simply by looking at this, how can you arrive at anything? How do you know whether customers have increased or not?
No, what we are saying is that every customer is the total number of.
On an average, it's 1056.
Okay.
We can see that the customers are.
What we are saying is number of sales are increasing, but the sales per customer is not increasing. Sir?
I can't say that because I don't see. Okay, hold on, everyone. Let's take a simple example. Let's say in 2013, in fact, we have the customers, no? Just a moment. Just give me a second. Let me keep my customer ID. This way you will understand. Customer ID, I'll put it in my tooltip and I will change it to my distant count, correct? Now, what is it telling you? It is telling you that in 2013, how many customers were there? We had 595. Everyone? Then in the next year, it was 573. Now, do you see what I'm talking about? In 2014, the number of customers have actually decreased. But if you look at the average has increased, 890. But if you look at 2015, 573 became 637. And then in 16, it became 693.
Okay.
Without, see, these are good questions you're asking, but that's why I'm giving you a very clear answer. If I simply make this chart and I put it on a report and I send it to my manager, and my manager asks me, oh, Havish, because these bars are increasing, does this mean that my number of customers are also increasing? What will be your answer? You will say that I don't have sufficient information to prove or disprove it. Simply by looking at the average, you cannot predict whether the number has increased or decreased. For example, maybe, listen carefully, everyone. Maybe in 2016, we only had 50 customers. Okay, not 693. But maybe all the 50 customers had an average of 1,000. Does that make sense? See, number of customers. Tell me.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. Sir, to summarize it, it means the bucket size is around 220 average.
This is the average transaction
size, right? Or ticket size, but number of transaction has increased.
No,
but number of transaction has increased, right? We can comment on that.
We'll have to find that. If you want to find out how many transactions have increased, let me do this again. Let me put my customer ID in tooltip once more. Just a second. So I'm putting my customer ID in tooltip and I will do this as a count. Now you can find out that the number of transactions in 2013 were 1993. It increased to 2102. Then it became 2580. Then it became 3319.
Yes, sir. Got your point.
Is it see, like I said, these are good questions. Let me just quickly show it to you in a different way, okay? Let's say there are 2 years, 2013 and 2014. I'll just make a very small example. And what we have here is, these are my customers, okay? So I have A, B, C, D, and E. In 2013, the customer A total purchase was 50, then 100, then 75, and then 50, and 125. So if I look at the average, my average comes out to, okay, what did I do? Just a second. I think I must have put a negative sign somewhere. My average is 80. But watch this. In 2014, maybe 2 customers left the company. So if you notice, we only have A, B, and C. But how much did they purchase? They purchased 125, 75, and 150. Now, if you notice, the average is going to come out to 160. Now, you might say, but does this mean that the number of transactions have increased? It is not necessary. Maybe the number of transactions in 2013, so number of transactions were, there were 5 transactions. Let's say there were 5 transactions for each one. Maybe in 2014, my number of transactions was only 1. Maybe there was only 1 transaction, but this was worth 125, 75, and 150. So basically, what am I showing it to you? I'm telling you that the average has increased. The number of transactions has come down from 25 to 3. But despite that, you notice that the average is still increased. Why is the situation not possible? It is definitely plausible, right? Maybe the number of customers were reduced to, by the way, this happens in a lot of companies, okay? Like, I'll tell you what we used to do. So when I was working with Reckitt, I was handling 1,200 outlets, okay? And what we used to do as a part of our business plan is we used to what you call divest from the bottom 10%. So that means the bottom 120 performers would be removed from the company. Now, when we remove the bottom 120, what happens? Obviously, the average goes up because the bottom 120 are the worst performers, correct? So if you remove the 120 from the bottom, then of course the average will go up. That's what I'm trying to show you. Do not jump to conclusion in this without looking at the count and the number of unique customers. You can't jump to a conclusion and say that, oh, this means that more customers have been added to the business. It is not necessary at all. Maybe in 2016, everyone, maybe in 2016, we only had 1 customer, right? But that is not possible because if there was only 1 customer, then this 1056 would be what? It would be the average. Is it possible or not? Tell me. If you look at this 1056, you tell me, is it possible that it's 1056 for only 1 customer? Yes or no?
Sir,
No, in that.
think, sir.
Why not? Why is it not possible?
No, sir.
Why can't this
Before
1056?
answering that, sir, I had a question, sir.
Tell me.
Can you explain this? What is this 223 in that example which you are showing right now? In the Excel,
Just say that once again. What do you want me to repeat
sir,
or
this
explain?
222 and 223, the average of a customer.
This
Can
one?
you explain this in that example, sir?
I'm just confirming. This blue one you are referring to, right?
Yes, sir, light blue.
This is this. Hold on. When I do D&D, and if I look at, let's say, all the transactions, and if I average them out, what will the average come? Let me show it to you this way. Let me select central region, okay? If I select my entire sales column, do you see the average at the bottom, everyone? 215. This is what that 215 is. That means 215 is the average of every transactions for the central region. Let me do it for 2013 so you'll understand it better. 1 minute. So 2013, I'm selecting only 2013 here, okay? And if I look at the average, do you see this 242? This 242 is what is represented here, 242.38. How many transactions happened in 2013? If you look on the left side, everyone, 1,993, correct? What is it telling me? It is telling me there were 1,993 transactions. What was the average? So if I divide the total sales, let me do it like this. Wait. Is it clear now? What was the total sales? 4,83,000. How many transactions? 1,993. What was the average of those 1,993 transactions? 242. Everyone? These three numbers are just basic calculation, right? Total sales is here. If you look, total sales is 4.69 lakhs. Number of transactions is 2102. What is the average of every transaction? If I divide 4.69 by 2102, I will get 223. This is not the difficult part. This is just a basic total divided by the count, sum divided by count. This is the interesting part. This 1056 tells me that if I have a number of customers, the average of those customers is 1056. But does it tell me how many customers were there? Absolutely not. Maybe it was one customer, maybe it was 10,000 customers. The only thing it is telling me right now with confidence is that how many so ever customers were there, the average was 1056. What do you think? A little clearer? Guys, you tell me, hold on. Think of this example. I tell you that the average of batch 1 was 50, the average of batch 2 was 55. If I just tell you the average of batch 1 is 50 and batch 2 is 55, can you infer how many participants were there in each batch? Obviously not. Maybe in batch 2 there were only 2 people, maybe in batch 1 there were 50 people, correct? For example, today we have 65 people in the room, okay? Let's say I do a feedback and I get a 4 out of 5. Tomorrow I have another session with another college and I tell you the feedback was 4.7 out of 5. Can you tell me by only listening to the feedback how many participants were there in the batch? Of course not. The average is a normalized value. The average doesn't tell you the count. That's the reason we find out the average, isn't it? Because when we find out the average, we are not taking into account the count at all. For example, in 2015 and 16, I can compare 953 to 1056. So what is my inference here? I will say that on an average, my customer total, which was 953 in 2015, has increased to 1056. But does it tell me whether the number of customers has increased, decreased, or remained the same? Absolutely not. That is not the purpose for which we are doing this. It would not be possible for us to do that. What do you think?
Sir, can we say that the average ticket value is the total value of the sales divided by total number of?
This is the total sales divided by total number of customers. This is not the total sales divided by total number of customers. What is this? This is the total of each customer divided by the number of customers. Okay. Let me do one more. I'll do it with a smaller data set so that this time all of you will understand this. 1 second. Region, segment, and no, you know what? In fact, let me select my category. I'll select my subcategory. Okay. But category would not work. Just a second. Select my region one. Yeah, I think this is great. Let me remove my grand total so that you're not confused. Okay. We have a pivot table. Let's understand what is happening here. It is telling us there are 17 categories of products that I'm selling: accessories, appliances, art, so on and so forth. This is the sales for all the 4 regions, right? If I ask you, what is the average of every transaction? What will you do? You will say right click, summarize as average. What does it mean? It means that I must have sold accessories hundreds of times. And if I take the sum of accessories divided by the count of accessories, it will give me 184. Right, everybody? But here's the important bit. If I copy this once again, and this time I'll do something different. I will say, let me look at the sum only, but let me find out the average of the total of each of these subcategories. What is it giving me? 29,405. So I would like somebody to explain to me that if I'm looking at, this 215 and this 29405, what do both of these numbers mean? What is 29405? What is 250? Take a moment. Don't hurry. Think about it. Both of these are correct answers. Okay, nothing is incorrect here. You have to tell me which one means what.
Sir, 215 is basically average of average. It's average of all these averages.
No. Hold on. 215 is what? The average of?
Averages, all these like per customer, accessories, appliances.
No. It is no. Hold on, everyone. This
It
is
is
not
average of all the
averages.
transactions.
If you hold on, everybody. If you select these numbers, you notice the average comes as 402. 215 is not the average of averages. 215 is the total sales divided by the total number of transactions. All of you can see this.
It is average of all the transactions.
It is the
and
average of, see, 215 is simply the average of all transactions. Simple. Basically, what is the total sales for the entire company? It is, let me remove my filter first. The total sales for the company is 22,91,000. If I divide it by the count, which is 9,995, what will it give me? It will give me 229. What does it mean? 229 is the average of the total company, which is what we are doing here. 215 is the average of central region. 229 is the average of the entire organization, all the regions. Now tell me, what is this 29405?
it is average of subcategory.
Exactly.
Sales in subcategory.
2940 means that if I take out the sum of each subcategory in the central region, then the average of the sum of these subcategories is 29405. Right? So
Yes.
how will I explain this to the management? I will say that in the central region, I'm selling 17 subcategories. Okay. What is the range? There is a subcategory whose total is only 752, which is the least. And there is a subcategory whose total is 85,000, which is the highest. But if I average every single product category, then my average is 29,000. That means that on an average, the subcategories that I'm selling in the central region is worth 29,000. Not each transaction, each subcategory as a whole. When I do it like this, does it not make much more sense? And that's the reason I always tell people, please do this on Excel. Otherwise, what will happen? You will do it on Power BI. You will get some numbers and you will not even know what these numbers mean. It's super important to make sure that you're doing this on Excel because here you can do it manually to see, okay, this is what it means. For example, if I wanted this 29405, I'll just do it here. So I create a new quick measure. What will I say? Average per category. What is the base value sales? What is the category? Guys, is it region or is it subcategory? What do I keep in the category here?
Subcategory.
Absolutely. So we will keep our subcategory here. So what will it do? It will basically find the sum of each subcategory and then average it out, right? So now when I make a chart with my region and my sales average per subcategory, you will notice that we get South is 22,986, right? Oh, let me show you for Central only. Central is 29405. This is the same number that you see here, which I had to do manually like this. Right? Now, a lot of you must be thinking, but Abhish, if we can do this on Excel also, then why do we need Power BI? See, the reason we need Power BI is that right now you're looking at subcategories for all the region. But the problem is that if you have to change anything, everything takes more time because this formula is manual. Tomorrow, if you filter the data, then the calculation might not work properly. For example, if I'm only looking at my top two, then this formula is still referring to all the blank cells. And these are not good modeling habits. So you don't create good models in this manner, right? Since you've asked a few questions, I will not take up any more questions right now because I want to show it to you on Tableau. And then you can ask me any questions that you have. And after that, we will go to Power Query. Okay, now, like I said yesterday, Power BI is a free tool. Remember everyone, so you can go on, I've already shared the links with you, so you can just download Power BI Desktop. On the other hand, Tableau is not free. But then how do you work with it? There are two options that you have. One option is you will go to Tableau Student, right? So Tableau for students, I think is available for, I think Shadman will be able to tell you this, maybe for 1 year or for 2 years, something like that. So basically you just have to put in your, some student details here using your official ID, and they give you license for 1 year, right? College ID, right? Shadman, is it for 1 year or is it for 2 years? I think it's for 1
So
year.
1 year.
1 year, right? Okay. Or
It is for
you can also look at Tableau Public.
We can extend for second year also.
I'm sorry?
So we can extend it for second year
excellent.
by providing the same ID.
Okay, all right. I wasn't aware of that. The other option, everybody, that you have is Tableau Public. Now, I know it says it's free, but there are big limitations in Tableau Public. The biggest limitation is that with Tableau Public, your data will also become public. That means that if I make a report, what will happen? I cannot save it on my computer. I can only save it on the cloud, right? So if you look at the Tableau Public gallery, you will notice that different people from around the world have created these reports. But the problem is that while you can make all of this using the free version, the moment you make it, the data will also become public and anybody can see it. Now you might say, but who will ever use it? We only use it with public data, you know, maybe government data, COVID data, United Nations data, bank data, anything which is publicly available, like stock market information, right? What am I working on? I'm working on the Tableau Professional Edition. This is the paid version, right? It's called Tableau Desktop. So Tableau Desktop is the paid version, and Tableau Desktop is available for, so if you notice there are different versions of Tableau available. We have desktop, server, online, prep. Tableau Public is the free one. And if you look at the pricing, Tableau Desktop is available as a part of something called Tableau Creator, which means that you have to pay $70 per user per month. So basically about 60,000 rupees per year. And what do you get in this? You get Tableau Desktop, Tableau Prep Builder, which is something we'll not be covering, and Tableau Server and Tableau Online. So this is the one that I have. For teams and organizations, you have some bigger plans available. So you can get Tableau Explorer and Tableau Viewer as well, which means that if a user is creating the report, you need Tableau Creator. If a user only wants to view the report, then you can get Tableau Viewer like this. I'm not getting too in-depth in this, but I just wanted to share with you. It's important to, you know, so if tomorrow somebody asks you, is it costly? Is it free? How much does it cost? You should have a little bit of idea about all of this, right? Great. All right, so this is Tableau. And what I want to do is, this is the first window. By the way, if you will all allow me, let me quickly just a second. Let me close everything so that I show you from scratch how it looks. Okay, this is the first window, everyone. On the left side, you notice there are some files that you can connect to. So Excel, text, Access, PDF and all. If you click on more, then you can select other types of files as well. Similarly, if you want to connect to databases or server, you notice there is a very large list of options available here. Is it better than Power BI? It depends. There are certain areas where Power BI is better. There are certain areas where Tableau is better. But typically there is a conception that Tableau is much better working with big data sets. Power BI, on the other hand, can also work with big data, but Tableau is much better, right? I'll just put it like that. But fundamentally, both of them are comparable. So there isn't a lot of difference between them. Okay, so I'll click on Excel. I will select my Superstore data. What is the first thing that you see? It shows you the sheet, right? Remember the D&D sheet? I click on sheet number 1. The first thing I want to do is I want to make a basic chart like this one. You know, this 242, 223, 235 and so on. Let's see how we do that. So we will select sales. Then I will select my region. But we don't want to see the sum of sales. We want to see the average. So we'll click on the drop down and we will change the sum to a average. How do you see the numbers at the top? I can just select my sales and put it in label. And here also I will change it to the average. So just to confirm everyone, Central is 215, East is 237. right? So one moment. Let me also keep the region here. Region. Okay, so central is 215 and east is 237, right? So we are mapping both the numbers. So far, everything is very simple. Now comes the difficult part. How did we create our measure? Remember, we had to do this. We created keep filters, values. So basically, we found out the sum of sales for every single customer, and then we averaged it out, right? We are not averaging every transaction, but the average of the total of every customer. To do this on Tableau is very different, right? The end result would be the same, but the process is super different. So don't try to think that if you learn Power BI, this will become simple. Not at all. I want to create a calculation, right? So we click on this small drop down and then we say create calculated field. You can do it here also. You can click on analysis and select create calculated field. A calculated field is like a measure. So basically we use DAX to create a measure on Power BI. We're using a calculated field on Tableau. What do I want? I want to find the average ticket size per customer. That's what we want, remember? Now, what I'm showing you is a very advanced calculation. These are called LOD expressions. I'll just come back to Google in a bit, but I'll just write it here what LOD is. LOD is level of detail expressions, right? Okay, let's see how we do this. So we will first put a curly brace like this. And then we will say include. Now, what do we want to include? We want to include our customer name and the sum of sales. So just think about what we have done. We have said that do not show me do not sum up all the transactions, only show me the individual sum of every single customer. That is what we were doing in Power BI also. Here, what were we saying? We were saying these are all the customer IDs. What do we want to see? The sum of the sales of each customer individually. That is what we're doing here also. We are saying first, give me a list of all the customers and then find out the sum of sales of every single customer, right? When I press OK, you notice a calculation has been created here, this green one. So we will put this in rows, but we need to change something, okay? So what we will need to do here is, I will now go to my second chart, right? And I'll remove the sales because I want to keep my average ticket size. Just a second. And we also want to look at the average now. So we look at the average and we will look at the average. So basically, if you look 1055, 1005, same thing, 1055 for West and 1005 for East. That is what we have managed to do in Tableau as well. The process, as you could all see, is very different. Now here you must be wondering, but why did I have to go to this and change it to average? In Power BI, we did not change it to average, but you know why? The reason in Power BI, I did not have to change my sales average per customer. See, here there's no option to convert to average because if you look at the formula itself found out the average X, right? But in Tableau, what happens? When we are doing the calculation is not finding out the average for us. So if I show the calculation, it is only summing up the values, the sum of sales for each customer. To average it, we are finding out the average here. The first one is not required. If I want to remove it, I can. I just wanted to show both of them to you to tell you how they can be compared with each other. Right? These are called LOD expressions. These, like on a level 1 to 10, ranging from easy to difficult, LOD expressions are the most difficult concept in Tableau, right? So there are three types. There is fixed, include, and exclude. And there is a beautiful link available, this one, top 15 Tableau LOD expressions. It's on the official Tableau website. And they have explained some beautiful topics. These are very difficult. So don't think you will be able to understand everything in one moment. The good part is that if you click on the download button, you can download all these examples. Do you see this? I can download the entire Tableau workbook. I can see what calculations they have used and how they have done it. So they have looked at customer order frequency, customer cohort analysis, right? Finding out certain KPIs, percent of total and all is easy. customer acquisition, very, very important. Right? And like this, there are different common things that organizations across the world are using. So what I'll do is I'll just copy this link and I'll share it with you. So this is Tableau LOD. Okay, now you can ask your questions. Don't worry about the syntax and all. The syntax and all you will learn. You practice it a few times and you will learn it. The first time I did it, I was also very confused. I said, why is this curly brace coming? You know, why is there a colon in the middle? There is no reason for it. It's just a syntax, right? So don't worry about the syntaxes, but why we are doing it, I hope that part is clear. Anyone? Any question? In any case, I will be sharing with you the solved Power BI file today, and the Tableau file is already available, right? So you can go to the website and you can download all the files from here. Right? So that is not a problem at all. And if you want to understand basic Tableau, you can just go again to the Tableau website and they explain what is Tableau. In fact, it's the same example that I covered for you. How to find out customer name and sales value, like this. Again, you know, a lot of people say, when I do these trainings for colleges, a lot of people say, why are you covering these difficult topics? Why can't you just keep it simple and tell us how to make visualizations? But this is not a visualization training, right? This is a case study workshop. These are the sort of things that you will be expected to do in an organization. So when you go to a company, they're going to ask you these tough questions. They're going to ask you, they're not going to ask you what is the average sale. Anybody can find out what the average sale is. They're going to ask you what is the average ticket size per customer, right? And you have to be able to tell them that in the West region, on an average, every customer is purchasing worth 1,055. Do we know how many customers are there in the West? See, by looking at this, can you tell me whether East has 100 customers and West has 5 customers? We don't know. Maybe West only has 2 customers and East has 5,000 customers. Whatever it is, we don't know the count of customers by looking at all this, right? I mean, if we want to see that, we can. Like, I can put my customer ID in my tooltip, and then I can change my customer ID in a distinct count. So now what will happen? It will tell me 629 customers, 674, 512, 686, right? So I hope by now all of you are able to see that Power BI and Tableau are basically the same thing. They're just different tools created by different companies, right? But they're all doing the same thing. The process might be a little different. Like here, the charts are here on the right side. All the fields are here on the left side, right? But other than that, the results, the analysis that you're calculating would all remain the same. Good. Now I want to come to customer cohorts. So anything you would like to ask on this part before we come to that? Right. So we want to come to KNN clustering. Yeah, we'll do that. And don't worry, it took me 1.5 months to really understand how LOD works. Remember, DAX LOD is something you will take a couple of months to understand. You will have to practice a lot. But you know the good part? If you guys spend that 2 months understanding it, you will have an upper edge compared to other people. By the time you guys go for your summer internship, especially for the first years, most of the students will just start to work with Power BI. You know, they will know how to make a chart and a bar chart and all that, while you will be able to do these advanced calculations. Okay, so now I want to show you what we call customer clusters. Right? We call them clusters, we call them cluster segmentation. We also sometimes call them cohort analysis. Right? As you can see, cohort analysis can be done on Power BI also. It can be done on Tableau also, right? But if you notice in Tableau, if you have to create it, it is available, but do remember it is going to be a little difficult because you will have to create some calculations of your own. The good part is today the classification that I'm going to show you will work automatically. So do you see all this? You have to create these fixed and dated different types of calculations. The good part is we will use something called KNN, right? KNN is one of the most popular models that we use, which is the K nearest neighbor. I will explain what KNN is in a bit, right? But KNN basically is a K nearest neighbor. It means that it's a non-parametric method, and it's used both for regression and for classification, right? It's a very old model, one of the simplest ones. What does it help you to do? Imagine if all of these were different types of customers you have, it will categorize them into different types of customers, right? So the blue ones are similar, the red ones are homogeneous, and the green one is an outlier, something like this. We can do this on Python, we can do this on R. Basically, KNN is so obvious that whatever you're working on, you can do it on Python, you can do it on R, right? So it's available on literally every platform. How do we do it? Very, very simple. In Power BI, we will make a scatter plot. And what do we keep in this? We will keep our profit, which will come in profit come in my y-axis, and my sales will come in my x-axis. Okay. Can anybody tell me why is there only one dot? It's supposed to be a scatter plot, right? So why is there only one dot?
Because it has taken total profits and
Absolutely.
total sales.
Because we have not given anything in the detail, what is it doing? It is basically thinking that the organization is only one entity. But we know that there are multiple details. So if I keep my region, what will happen? There will be 4 dots, right? So west, east, and so on. If I keep my subcategory, then there will be 17 dots because it will show me 17 subcategories. So what is it telling me? That if you look at phones are the highest on sales and profit. But if you look at tables, the sales for table is fairly good. It is 2 lakh, but the profit is a negative profit at minus 17,000, correct? Okay. But if I keep my customer, what's going to happen is it is going to make 793 of these for me because it is going to show me every single customer in my business. So far, so good. Let me work on it side by side, okay? So I'll do the same thing on Tableau also. So I will first select my sales and my profit and make this into a scatter plot. So again, we get the summation here, but we want to put our customer name in detail, and this way it will make a scatter plot. So if you notice, same thing. It looks a little different, but it's the same result. Once we have done this, how do you make different segments? I can click on these 3 dots in the top right corner and then select automatically find clusters. You know, that's the beauty of Power BI. You don't have to do any calculation manually. You don't have to apply a model. You simply say automatically find clusters. So if you notice, it is asking you how many clusters do you want. You can either set it to auto, which means that Power BI will automatically determine how many clusters. But if you want to choose, you can do that also. So let's say I want to see 5 customer clusters. I press OK and it will make 5 customer clusters for me. So if you notice, one customer cluster is this part, right? Another customer cluster is this part. Then we have these ones in blue. Then we have this, and then we have this, right? Here's my question. Oh, by the way, let me do it on Tableau as well. So in Tableau, I click on Analytics. We have cluster. We drag our cluster on the chart. And again, it will ask me how many clusters. I'll say 5 clusters, and it will make 5 clusters for me. If you notice carefully, this result and this result will be exactly the same, right? Right? But not 100%. If you notice, it looks very much like the same one, but do you see this one, everyone? This is this part. Ken is coming where? It is coming in cluster 2. But if you look here, Ken is actually coming cluster 5, right? Ken is actually coming with this part, the last one. But here, if you look at this, notice Ken is coming in this part. Now you must wonder, but how is it possible that if Tableau and Power BI are basically using the same model, then how is it possible that the results are, just that 1% different? The reason is that even in KNN clusters, there are a lot of things that you can customize on your own. For example, let's look at this. Now you notice that you have all these dots here. Watch carefully. If I change the position of even one dot, do you see how that green area is shifting, everyone? But if I drag this too much outside, after a point, you notice that this green dot will actually not become a part of the green one. He will come in a different cluster altogether. This is what we refer to as the KNN nearest neighbor, right? Like this. And the objective here is to have as smooth a line as possible, like this. There are lots of different concepts in this. You can read the theory. Like we find out what we call the Euclidean distance, which is also the Pythagorean metric, right? So basically Euclidean distance is nothing but a straight line between 2 points, right? That's something that you use in KNN, right? Of course, see, I will not be able to explain all this right now, but I'm just telling you the keywords, and then you can always go back and read this on your own. I'll just write everything here. So for cluster, you have to understand KNN and Euclidean, okay? Another very important concept in KNN is what we call overfitting, right? I'm sorry. Super, super important. So overfitting basically means that, let's look at this. Overfitting basically means that you're trying to make a line which is too precise. You're trying to keep a line which is connecting every single dot. Now, everybody would say this is better than this on the good balance, but this is not good. You know why? Because this is not a smooth line. Do you see this? This is not a curve. This is not a straight line. This is called an underfitting, which means that you're trying to create a line. Usually in regression, we use this, correct? Linear line of best fit, linear regression, where we say that there is one line which is very close to all the dots. This is overfitting, this is underfitting, and this is what we call a good balance. That means we're using a sigmoid, we're using a curve. Now, if you notice, the curve is not connecting every dot, but it is as close to every dot as possible, right? And the same concept is very, very important when you're working with KNN clusters as well, because a lot of people say that, a balance is very important. So if you notice my data, which one do you think is the best one? Like, all these are 4 different types of clusters. Which one do you think would be the best one? Anyone? K equal to 1, K equal to 5, K equal to 10, K equal to 50. Which one do you think is the best one?
K equal to 15 because it's most delineated. The clusters are more delineated in that case.
Absolutely. That is exactly what every business wants to see. We always want to make sure that the clusters are delineated as clearly as possible. Remember, despite the fact that some of these people, do you see these green dots? They're not actually fitting inside the green area. They're fitting inside the other area. We will still end up using the 4th one. Now see, when you have a more complex model, we will end up using the 3rd one as well sometimes. Despite the fact that your customer clusters are not very clearly defined, the reason we might want to choose it is because these green dots are very important to us. Imagine they are your high net worth individuals and you don't want to classify them incorrectly, right? And that's the reason sometimes a business might decide to pick this. But 99 out of 100 times, we would always end up choosing this one, the last one, right? And like this, I mean, just Google it, you'll find so many different examples where people explain how all of these things work, right? Remember, KNN is by far the simplest way of doing this. There are lots of other methods that we use in regression and classification. So for example, you have SVM, right? Which is support vector machine. Fundamentally, it is the same thing. It's a supervised learning, but we usually say that this is a part of machine learning, even though this is the same thing, regression and classification. what was there for KNN as well, right? But the basic idea is the same. The idea is that there are multiple data points, and what is our objective? Our objective is to classify it so that we can create different types of clusters in it. Very simple. Okay, now that we have understood this, let's go back to Power BI. Now comes the interesting business question, right? You guys are business students. You're not doing mathematics, you're doing business. Can you tell me which is the cluster most important to the business? It's a very interesting question. Let me see if you have the answer. We have 5 clusters, everyone.
Cluster 1.
Now, a lot of people will say cluster 1, which is this blue one, right? And how do you say that? Is this what you're referring to, the blue one? Tell me the color. Don't tell me the number. Tell me the color. Which color is most important?
That light blue one.
Light blue. Yeah, light blue.
Why?
The profit.
Remember, so we've done this earlier also, I think, in the lecture. This is what happens, you know, from a visual perspective. What will everybody jump to? They will jump to a conclusion and say, oh, maybe it's the orange one or maybe it's these guys, right? The purple ones. But just a quick recap, I won't spend a lot of time on this. If you make a bar chart and if I put my customer clusters and my profitability, very clearly it is telling us that cluster 1, which is the blue one, are the best one, followed by the purple ones. Then we have cluster number 5, which is the pink one, right? Then you have cluster 555. Cluster 5 is these guys, which are these 7 people who are at the top right of the spectrum. This is what we want to do. Same thing if you wanted to do here. This is a little difficult. Just try to understand how we do it. This is your customer name. This is your clusters, correct? Let me do it once again. Analytics, cluster, and we say 5, okay? Now, if I want to find out the profit for every cluster, how do you do that? Because I don't have a column called cluster. So what you have to do here is you will select cluster and put it back in your table. That way, what will happen is you will get customer name clusters like this. Once you have done that, it's easy. I can just make customer name clusters and my profit and make a chart, and it will tell me like this, right? So the same thing, right? It is telling me cluster 1 has 1.11 profit. Let me also solve the data like this. So if a business says, which is the most important, you're able to tell them that cluster 1, 3, 2, 4, 5 in this order. Then if somebody says, which region has maximum cluster 1 and which region has maximum cluster 3, now I can put my region in my color and it will tell me. Do you see this interesting part, everyone? If you look at cluster 2, and if you look at all the regions here, right? So we have Central, East, South, and West. Central region is actually generating a negative profit, which means it's incurring a loss, while all the other 3 are profitable, which means what? Overall, cluster 2 is profitable, okay? But if I look at all the regions, there is one region which is not profitable. The same thing I can do here also. If I put my region in my legend, what will happen? Very interestingly, it will show you that even though cluster 2 as a whole or cluster 5 as a whole is profitable, if you look at this part, central region is actually a negative profit, right? And this is the type of detailed analysis that a business wants to see. See, simply showing this is not enough, okay? Why not? Because just muting everyone, right? So I hope this was clear. This is the type of detailed analysis that you're able to do like this. Okay. Another thing that you can do both on Tableau and Power BI is that maybe you want to see the customers whose minimum sales is, let's say, 5,000. So I can put my sales as a filter. So right click and show filter. And I can make this 5,000. And if you notice, I'm only interested to see the customers whose sales are over 5,000 like this. If you want to do the same thing in Power BI, no problem. I can make a slicer, this one. In the slicer, I will keep my profit amount and I'll do the same thing. I will say, I only want to see customers whose profit is more than, oh, sorry, not my profit, but my sales amount. My sales amount is more than 5,000 like this. Remember, numbers might look a little different because the exact calculation is also a little different. Kaustubh, The Bayes probabilistic classifier. See, guys, just give me 10 seconds. I'll just close the door. There is a lot of noise coming from somewhere. Just a moment. Yeah, so Kaustubh's question is, can you use the Bayes probabilistic classifier? Now see, what happens is that you have to understand Tableau and Power BI are data visualization tools. You know, they are not statistical tools or tools which will help you with data science. It's not a data science tool, okay? If you want to do it, what you can do is, you notice you have both R and Python in it. So R and Python integration is available on Power BI. So basically you can run a R script directly within Power BI. Right? I mean, even though I'll be showing this in the next lecture on Saturday. So when I cover R and Python, an overview, I'll also show you how R and Python can be used in Power BI. So I don't want to do this right now because it will take some time, but basically this is your environment and you can sort of directly write everything here. Let me see if there is an inbuilt visual available. Just hold on. There might be, but that will also use R if I'm not mistaken. Just a moment. Why is my sign-in option not coming? Should I try once again? Okay. Let me click on get more visuals and see if there is your Bayes classifier. No, it's not there, right? But if I look at classification, you have decision tree. Yeah, there's not much, you know, like I said, I was not expecting that this would be there. If you want to do this, then you can run R and Python scripts. That's the only option that you have, right? Good. So we've done classification now, a simple KNN. Like I said, please read about it a little bit. The terminologies I've already given to you. It's very important for you to read about KNN, Euclidean, and overfitting, right? Even if you don't want to read like 5 pages, at least read about these two terms. I think this is the most important thing here. Okay. Let me just quickly see. Okay, let's come to forecasting now. The forecasting in Power BI is very limited. They only use exponential smoothing. So forecasting in Power BI is only right, but Tableau is more powerful, right? So I'm going to show this to you on Tableau. Let me make a new sheet. Let's do it from the scratch. So I will first select my order date and I will select my sales amount and I will convert this into a line chart, right? Now it is showing you 13, 14, 15, and 16, but remember we want to see the month as well. So I can just click on my year and change it to the month, which is great. If I put my region in rows now, it will show me 4 different trend lines. But now you want to obviously see the forecast. So we can simply go to analytics, go to forecast. I mean, I'll just spend 2 minutes on it because everything is already there. You can simply select your forecast and put it inside and you get a forecast like this. If you want to change the model, you can right click and on forecast, you can click on forecast options and then you have different models that you can choose. And here you have automatic without seasonality, custom model, right? And in custom, you have different trends that you can choose like this. If you want to read about this in more detail, you can just click on this link, learn about forecast option. It will take you to the Tableau website. It will take you like 30, 45 minutes to read all of this, but this is a must read. They don't explain how forecasting works. They explain how forecasting works on Tableau, right? And everything is explained really well. Right? There are a few pages available on this. So just share this link with you as well. All right. Okay, now let's come back to our Power BI file. And I have a question. So when you're working with FMCG companies, it is very important to know what is the sales split between weekdays and weekends. For example, a Big Bazaar would be very interested to know when are customers purchasing more, or for that matter, any retail outlet. Let's say you have an apparel company which has, let's say, Raymond, right? So because I've done some work with Raymond in the past, now Raymond has both franchises and it has company-owned outlets, right? And it has multi-brand outlets. Now it wants to find out, when do customers purchase more? Do the customers purchase more on weekdays, or do the customers purchase more on weekends? Tell me, why is it important to find out when are customers purchasing more? Anyone? What significance does it have? Whether they're purchasing more on weekend or weekday?
They will provide sale when the sale.
Absolutely. Very simple.
The sale is less.
Absolutely. So it has a lot of significance for the sales promotion. It has a lot of significance for the trade marketing. So trade marketing means that if there is any special offer, or maybe there is a new launch that happens, of course you would want to have a launch on a day when more people are coming in, right? So obviously for every business in retail, it's super important. For example, does a Airtel or a Vodafone Idea care about when are customers purchasing more? Yes or no? What do you think? Will a telecom company care about when do customers?
I think no, because there
Absolutely
are
not.
subscription.
Because it doesn't make any difference, right? Whether they're purchasing on a Saturday or a Sunday, it doesn't matter, right? Because the only marketing that these guys are doing is happening with a above the line direct marketing, which basically is like a television ad or a billboard, which doesn't really have much significance related to a weekend or a weekday. So always remember, it's not necessary that every client, every industry needs to do this analysis. But because we are working with sales data, where we're selling products, we want to find out Saturday versus Sunday. Now, this is the part where we focus on what we call data wrangling, right? I'm sure those of you who have been working on R or Python are aware of this term. Some of you might have heard of it. Some of you might not have heard of it, right? So data wrangling basically is just a common term that we use. Some people call it data munging also, but wrangling is the most common term. Basically, it just means that you're taking your raw data, right, and converting it into a more appropriate and valuable format. Remember, data transformation or data wrangling does not mean that you're doing analysis. A lot of people have this confusion. Data wrangling simply means that you're transforming the data. That means my data currently is in dates, 3rd of January, 4th of January, 5th of January. And what do I want to do? I want to convert it into weekday. How do we do this? Can anybody tell me that if I was working on Excel, let me just take a simple example. How do I find out what day is it? What formula can I use? There are two formulas. So can anybody tell me what these two formulas are? How do I know that it is a Sunday?
Weekday formula is there.
Okay, good guess. But unfortunately, weekday will only return a number. Everyone, do you see this? 1 to 7. So what will happen when I use weekday and I say that 1 is Sunday? We usually say 1 is Monday and 7 is Sunday, correct? So if 1 is Monday and 7 is Sunday, what will be my result be? My result will be 7. But this is not what I want. I want to find the actual weekday. So there are two ways of doing this. One is to write equal to text, right? And then what format do you want to change it to? We want to change it to DDDD, right? I will convert it into a Sunday like this, right? In fact, actually this, let me just show you the one. It's not necessary to show you other options. This is the best one, right? This is how you convert it into a weekday. How do we do this on Power BI now? Because we have to do this with the entire data set, correct? So we'll go back to Power BI and we will select something called Power Query. Do you see this? It's called Transform Data. What is Power Query? It's an ETL tool. It allows you to connect, prepare, and transform the data, which is exactly what we wanted. So I click on this button and we get a window like this. Is it a part of Power BI? Absolutely. So if you notice, Power BI is in the background and this is Power Query running on top of it. Is Power Query used for data analysis? Absolutely not. We are only using it for data transformation. So what are we doing right now? We know that we have an order date and I want to convert this into the day. Now there are multiple ways of doing this. Please watch. I will select my column order date. Okay. And then we can click on transform, everyone. And then we have date. And in date, we can select day and then the name of day. So what has happened? It has all got converted into the day. This is one way of doing it. The other way is, I don't want to convert this into the day. I want to retain this column and create another column. So we'll click on add column and we'll do the same thing. Date, day, and then name of day. And if you notice, it gives us the day name. I've shown you two options. The third one is you can go to add column and select column from examples. That means I don't want to explain to Power Query what do I want. I want Power Query to automatically do it for me. Please, it will make more sense when you see it in action. I've selected the column called order date. We click on column from examples from selected column. And now I'll give it a sample. Do you see this? It says, please enter a sample value to create a new column. So if I write any letter, S, E, A, it doesn't matter. If I write S, do you see what is happening? It is automatically detecting that the 3rd of January 2013 is a Thursday. Amazing, right? Even if I wrote A, it will still give me multiple options. So it will say, Havish, what do you want to find out? Do you want to find the age in the number of days? Do you want to find the month number, the days, the quarter, whatever it is, right? So we want to find Thursday. And you notice it will automatically tell me the day for every single value. And if you want to do this manually, then you have to create a formula, which is add column and custom column. Now remember, you can't use Excel formulas here. Also remember, these are not DAX formulas. This uses a completely different language called mQuery. It is not a programming language, it's a formula language called mQuery, M formula, right? So what is it? How does it work? I will say day dot day of week name, right? So this is my, date dot day of week name. This is the function name, okay? This is the function. So obviously in a function, I will need to write an argument. So what is my argument? It is my order date, right? And the good part is if you make any mistake, it will tell you that there is an error that is happening. So it will not allow you to press OK. Only when I complete the formula, it will allow me to press OK. So I've written date dot day of week name. I've selected the order date column. And when I press OK, it will give me Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But the problem is that I only want to see weekday and weekend. I'm not interested to know whether it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I just want to know whether it was a weekday or whether it was a weekend. So using this column, I can create another step. So I will now say conditional column, this one. It is like a if statement. So I'll say weekday or weekend. Or let's just call this day type. So I'll say that if my weekday is equal to Saturday, then the output should be weekend. Else if my weekday is equal to Sunday, then the output should again be weekend. Else the output should be weekday. I press OK and you notice it creates another column where Monday to Friday has been converted to a weekday and Saturday and Sunday has become a weekend. So basically, this is not something I require. So if I want to, I can right click and remove this column. It doesn't matter because why should I unnecessarily keep extra column? And you know the best part, do you see this on the right side, everyone? Applied steps. So this is how automation is done. So if you notice, the entire process that I have performed in the last lecture yesterday and in today's lecture has been saved. What was the first step? I went to my Excel workbook and I took the content from that file. What was the file? On my desktop, superstore.xlsx. The second step was I only picked up my D&D sheet. Remember, this is the sheet that we picked up. After that, I made my first row ID, order date, ship date as the header. And then I changed the type. So basically I made the text value, the number, and the date. Now you must be wondering, when did I do all this source, navigation, promoted headers, and change type? I did not. All these first 4 steps have been done automatically, right? So these are auto-generated steps. After that, what did we do? We added a custom column, which is your day. Then I added a conditional column, which is your weekday and weekend. And then I removed the column that I don't require. This is how you do data transformation on Power Query. And the best part is that this is a little bit like Visual Basic because you can automate your steps. You can actually record all these steps so that tomorrow when more data points will get added, I will only have to go to home and click on refresh. I will not have to repeat all these actions. Like in Excel, when you have more data points, you have to copy and paste the formula, correct? Here, you don't have to do anything. You simply have to click on refresh. Questions, anyone? It's very simple. Only 4 steps that I wrote. I will click on close and apply. And now the rest is easy. I can simply go back to my data set and I can say, I'll make a chart. And I'll show you something very interesting now. Watch this. In my legend, we will keep the day type. In my values, we'll keep our sales amount. And in our axis, we will keep the region. So do you see this? It is now telling us that West, East, and Central are 64, 64, 61%. And the highest contribution that is coming from weekday is coming in the South region. Here. Right? If you want to look at the pattern for the last 4 years, then I can remove my region and I can put my order date. You know, because as a business, I want to understand what is the trend for the last 4 years. So you notice that 66, 62, 64, 64. So basically, there isn't a lot of movement, right? So if you look at the weekend sales, from 33, it became 37. Then it became 35, it remained at 35. But if I drill down, now you notice a very interesting pattern. Do you see this, everyone? Do you see how it is moving in almost a seasonal manner like this? Which tells you what? That if you look at different quarters, every quarter does not have the same split between weekend and weekday. So if you notice, the highest sales for weekend has been in Q3 2015 when 42% sale came from weekend. But if you look at the lowest end of the spectrum, you notice that in Q1 in the same year, it was only 27%. Is it good? Is it bad? I'm not going to answer all those questions, but see, that is not our job. You have to understand. That is a job for the marketing guy. Your job as a data analyst is to provide him this information. After that, they will take the decision on their own end as to why is this happening and what action should be taken. Similarly, if I want to verify this for all my regions as well, let me just put it at the top. So I will make a slicer for my region. So you would notice here that I can actually click on every region to see for every region. Do you see how different they are? Like if you look at the East region, do you see this? I mean, in 2014, only 7% sale came from weekend, which basically tells me what as a marketing person that I should not put any effort into weekends because in any case, people are not coming. Or it might tell me that I should put a lot more effort because people are not coming on weekends. But if you look at South, it's so different. Just look at this. In East, it is 92% weekday. In South, it is 45%, right? And this is how you can sort of do what we call drill down analysis, where you're comparing different regions with each other. Right? And if I remove the date from here, I can also keep my subcategory because this is also very important. It will help me understand that for every region, which subcategories are, which product categories are sold more on weekends, which are sold lesser on weekends. Like when I was working with Reckitt, I was handling Big Bazaar. You know, and Big Bazaar was very curious to find out what categories sell more on weekends. Is it apparel? Is it home care? Is it hygiene products? Is it food items? Because that is how they do their entire inventory planning. See, inventory holding cost is also a very important factor, correct? For example, if Big Bazaar realizes that in weekend the sale of groceries is very high, fresh fruits and vegetables, what will they do? They will make sure that they are getting the stock right on time, right? Just in time. Because otherwise, if the sales is very low, then they will unnecessarily have to spend money holding the stock, which means there is an extra cost they're incurring, and also there is a chance of wastage that is happening. And does it not happen to you guys when you go to a store and they say it is out of stock? What does that signify? That simply signifies that they're not doing their planning properly. Because if they were doing their planning properly, they would have known that if you look at the data for the last 4 years, it is not possible that every year things will be different. Customers follow same habits, right? So if people are purchasing more products on between the 1st and the 5th of a month when a salary comes, the same pattern will be visible for every month, except holiday season. Because during holiday season, what happens? The entire basket of a customer shifts from basic necessities to gifting items, right? And that's why if you notice at Big Bazaar, you have these bundles and packages that are sold because they're spending more of their inventory allocation cost into different types of product categories. Right? Anyway, I don't want this to become a marketing lecture, but I hope now that especially the first years when you will start with your course and you will start doing different topics on marketing and finance and HR, you'll be able to relate it to Power BI. And in your mind, you can know, okay, I want to do this analysis and Power BI will make me capable of doing all this analysis. My question is, can you do this on Tableau? Can I do that weekend and weekday on Tableau? What do you think? Yes or no? Shradman, what do you think? Anybody who has worked on Tableau? We can, okay? We can, but you know what? It will just be more difficult because, by the way, I don't know how to do it because I don't do all this on Tableau. I only work on Power BI. Let me just check Tableau day name. So it is, we have to find the date part for this. Just a second. So how to create a calculation, find a day of week for a specific date, similar to the weekday function in Excel, okay? Anyway, but as you can see, there are different calculations available, but it will just be so much more difficult on Tableau because see, DAX is very, very similar to Excel. Power Query, the best part is that everything is available in a graphical interface. Did you see this? In Power Query, if you don't want to write the formula, you don't write the formula, you just come to the ribbon and select whatever you want. All the options are available. In Tableau, unfortunately, it's much more difficult. Even though now there is a different tool called Tableau Prep, which is a Power Query competitor. So basically what they have done is, Tableau Prep is essentially a competitor to Power Query. They allow you to combine, shape, and clean your data. Exactly what Power Query is meant for, like this. And this will have much more robust tools to do this type of analytics that I'm showing to you. Okay? It's a very new tool. It just came, I think, 8-9 months back. Great. Any questions, anyone? It is difficult, isn't it? It is. Believe me, if you compare it head on head, right? You will always realize that doing it on Power BI is so much simpler than doing it on Tableau. I'll give you a simple example. After this, we'll come to VBA also, right? So let's say I want to create a Sankey. Let me first show you what a Sankey looks like. A Sankey is a special type of a chart that looks like this. I'm sure you must have all seen it earlier, right? Maybe in a report, maybe in a magazine, somewhere you must have seen this. These look very nice. What do they show? They show the movement from the left to the right side, and the thickness of this arc is representing the weight, like this. Imagine I have to do this on Power BI. You know how simple it is? I can click on these 3 dots. I can select Get More Visuals, and I can click on Sankey. Let me do that once again. So I click on the 3 dots, Get More Visuals, and I can select Sankey. which is this one. We'll click on add, and that's it. And it says I was not able to import. That's not good. Let me do that once again. Okay. So I made the SAN key here. In this, we will keep, let's say, our sales value. We will keep our segment and our subcategory. And you notice very simply, we have managed to create a very nice visualization like this. And this is completely interactive. So you can change it however you like. Beautiful, right? If you want to do the same visualization on Tableau, you know what you will have to do? Just watch this. SAN key, Tableau. Just look at the number of steps that it requires. The same thing, I will first have to create parameters, dimensions, and measures. So I'll have to do calculations. Then I'll have to create these calculated fields. Just look at all this, everyone. Then I'll have to create LOD expressions. So many steps are required to do what? To basically get the same result that we were getting in Power BI in a single click. And that's the reason organizations are now moving towards Power BI more. See, organizations that already have a team that is competent to handle Tableau, they will continue to work on Tableau. But newer companies find it very difficult because learning Tableau is very difficult, as you can see. Okay? So Shadman has done it. So that's why he's confirming that SAN key is very difficult. And that's the reason I wanted to show it to all of you. Do you see all this, everybody? If path index is greater than 49, then you have to do a max position wrap. Then you have to create sigmoids. Then you have to create sign and cost values here. It's crazy, isn't it? And you know, when I show it to people, exponential values, they say, why would we ever do it on Tableau when we can do it on Power BI in literally one single click? I downloaded it and I clicked on it. That's the beauty of working on Power BI. Because in Power BI, you have more than 200 visualizations available like this, correct? But the problem in Tableau is that you don't have additional visuals. So if you notice, I only have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 21 visuals available. If I want to create anything other than this, I will have to create it myself. That means I'll have to write the formula. Like there's one more example I always show to people. This is called the circular calendar. It looks beautiful, right? But the problem is creating this is crazy. Just watch this. I'm sure all of you must have seen these circular calendars. One moment. Okay. Like this. I'm sure you must have seen this in a lot of reports, correct? And can we do it in Tableau? Of course we can. We can create something like this. It looks beautiful, right? And now do you want to see how much effort is required? Just watch this. You will have to first create all of this. So your depth parameter, your distance from center. Then you have to create your index values. Then you have to create items. Then you have to start working with mathematics, sign and cost values. After that, you manage to create something like this. I have done it. So I can tell you that the first time you do it, it will take you 30 minutes, even if you copy and paste. It's so difficult. I don't know if this is available for Power BI or not. Let me just check. It might not be. No. Anyway, this particular calendar is not available, but I just wanted to show this to you. It's not to scare you, okay? I just want all of you to know in your mind that Tableau is a difficult tool, okay? If you only want to make basic charts, in Tableau, it's very simple. For example, I've selected my state. I've selected my sales value. And I can make a pack bubble and I'll get a chart like this. And people will say, oh, it was so simple. I can put my region in color and I get a beautiful visualization like this. I agree. Visualizations like this are very simple on Tableau. The problem is that when you're starting to work with complex visuals, like the one you see on the internet, that is not going to be easy on Tableau. That is where Power BI will be much, much better. Right? Good. So I think today's session, we have done the explanation of our DAX measure, where we showed the average of all the customer name total. And I also showed you LOD on Tableau. We spent a lot of time on it, but it is time well spent, right? I mean, I would not consider it as wasting time. It is time very well spent. I would like all of you to practice that. Then I also introduced Power Query to you. So Power Query is a data transformation tool, like the example I showed you for weekend and weekdays. How did we do that automated process? By simply clicking on a few buttons on Power Query like this, right? And it works very well. If you notice, there are some buttons called Text Analytics, OCR, Azure Machine Learning, but these are only available on the premium version of Power BI. Like even I don't have access to all this, but the reason I'm showing this to you is to tell you that in the future, in another 1 year, 2 years, you will start to see that we will have auto ML. That means that this will all become zero coding. So you will not have to write programs and codes to do all this. Everything will work simply by clicking on a few buttons. Okay? In fact, in the next session on Saturday, when we do Python in R, I'll just give you a broader introduction to all these topics. Okay. So I want to save this Power BI report so I can send it to you. Let me save these notes as well. And let me close this. And I know it's a long session, but I'm going to start with VBA. And like we did with today's session, we can probably start 15 minutes early and I'll cover a few more examples. But today I just want to take 2 examples with you. So I'll just create an Excel file. Okay. Now I'm sure a lot of you would have heard of Visual Basic, but I want to show you how that works. So nothing special so far. We simply have a normal Excel file, nothing special. I will click on File and I'll click on Save As. I'll save it on my desktop, but I will not save it as an Excel SX. So if you notice this, the first option is a Excel workbook. I'm going to select the second one, which is an Excel macro enabled workbook like this. Let's call it my first macro. By the way, I'll send you this file as well. So let's keep it very simple. What have we done so far? We have saved it as a macro enabled workbook. So if you notice here, do you notice how this Excel is different from this one? This has an exclamation mark on it. This means that this one is a special type of Excel file, which can also run programs, run Visual Basic codes in it. The first thing that we need to do is we need to enable programming. So when you open Excel, programming by default is disabled. And why is that? Because Microsoft feels that a normal Excel user will never need to work with all these features. So we will click on File. We will select Options. Click on Customize Ribbon. And if you notice, there is an option called Developer. And when you open it for the first time on your computers, you will notice that this option is not ticked. You will have to put a tick mark. Whether you are working on Excel 2007, 10, 13, 16, 19, 365, it doesn't matter. This option will be available on every version of Excel, okay? So it's not a new feature. It has been there since the beginning of Excel, 35 years back. When you do this, a new button called Developer will appear. All good? I now want to show you how you can do automation on Excel. And we'll take a very, very simple example, like super simple. I will not even write any code. I'll just go online and I will type VBA code to create a table of content. Do you see this, everyone? These are the 3 magic words. VBA code to. After this, you can write whatever you want. Do you see how many options you're getting? So I'm going to write to create a table of content. And let me just go to the second website, the Spreadsheet Guru. Now I know the code is very long, but that's okay because we don't have to learn it. We just have to copy and paste it. I'll just scroll down. Do you see this entire code? I'll just copy the entire thing from the first line till the last line like this. Okay. Control C. We come back to Excel. Now the question is, where do we paste it? Very simple. We have the developer tab and on the left side, we have Visual Basic. So when I click on this, a window like this will open. Just give me a moment. A window like this will open. What is it showing you right now? It is showing you that we are working on a workbook called My First Macro, which has 1 sheet in it and 1 workbook, obviously. But where do I paste the code? I want to paste the code in what we call a module. So right click, insert and module. And in the module, what will we do? Control V. And you know what? That is it. This is all that you require to know to be able to become a programmer on Excel. What all did we do so far? I told you have to click on File, Options, Customize ribbon and enable the Developer tab. After that, we went to Developer, Visual Basic. We inserted a module, which is right click, insert and module, very simple. And then we just copied and pasted the code. Do you want to see how it works now? Watch this. If I click on Developer and Macros, you would notice that it is giving me a macro called Table of Content Create. This is a program that I've created. And when I click on Run, what will happen? It will make a new sheet called Contents. Table of Contents is sheet number 1. Now you might say, what's the big deal? It just created a hyperlink to sheet number 1. But imagine you had 100 sheets with you, okay? Everyone? You know what I can do now? I can click on Macros, Run, and in 1 single second, it will create a list of 100 sheets with a hyperlink to every sheet. How cool is that? Imagine if you had done this manually, how much time it would have taken you. You would have gone to every sheet, copy the name, then one by one, you would have had to put a hyperlink on every sheet. Even if you have 500 sheets with you, it will only take 1 second for this macro to run. And that's the beauty of programming in Excel. You don't have to do anything because you have not even hundreds, you have thousands of codes available on the internet. All you have to do is copy and paste it and run it. For example, I'm also going to share this code with you. Just a moment. And the second one that I want to share with you is top VBA codes. So do you see this website, Excel Off the Grid? This one has 100 VBA codes in it that you can just copy and paste and use as many times as you want, right? Just look at this. This is amazing, isn't it? You can just scroll down and it will show you. One moment. Okay, look at this. This is a macro to call other macros. This is a macro, hold on. This is how you hide selected sheets. This is how you very hide. This is how you unhide. Like this, there are 100 codes available here. All you have to do is one by one copy and paste it. And when you practice it, of course, you will learn as well. See, if you want to work in finance, all of you, you have to learn VBA. I don't say it because I like working on VBA and I've been working on VBA for many years. You have to. You can't become a finance graduate unless and until you know VBA. I'm not saying you have to be an expert, but at least some level of VBA knowledge should be there. If you're working in marketing, HR, supply chain, I think you can skip it. Skipping it means you don't need to learn it, but you should know how to use it. For example, how to go online and copy these codes, right? But for a finance student, I think it's a must. It will, you might say, but my seniors haven't done it. So what? Just because your seniors haven't done something doesn't mean it's not important, right? I work with a lot of CFOs in so many organizations, and I'm telling you, maybe only 1 out of 100 people know VBA, but the ones who do know VBA, they benefit so much because they're able to do their tasks so much faster and so much efficiently. Okay. Great. Any questions, anyone? When we resume next week, I will, by that time, I hope that you will also get the chance to practice VBA a little bit. And then, of course, I'll cover this in a little more detail. Yes, was somebody saying something?
So,
tell me.
Could you share some, some website where we can learn VBA, website where we can get content?
Where you want to learn VBA?
Yes.
See, you know what? In fact, you have encouraged me. In fact, I have a, hold on, I'll share this with you. I have like a 3-4 hour lecture on VBA. This is an open session I conducted. Do you see this, everyone? VBA open session part 01, 02, and 03, right? So this is about 4 hours or so, no, 5 hours or so. So in this, I've covered absolute basics of VBA. So you can watch this, right? It is available on YouTube. See, the only problem with websites is that VBA is a programming topic, right? So it's difficult, which means that, but don't worry, like in this one, I have explained everything from the absolute basic. What is VBA? How do you write your first line of code, right? So I think you can definitely have a look at this. I'll share the link with you. Yeah, so what
Yes,
I
sir.
would
I
say
think
is the problem with websites is that VBA is programming. It's hardcore programming, okay? Unlike DAX and MDX and all that. So usually it is meant for programmers. And there are very few websites that are for beginners, because a website for programmers expects that you already have a lot of knowledge, right? So it's not that I'm not willing to share it with you. It's just that I'm not really sure what to share. Like, okay, if you're asking, so one is this link that I shared with you. I'll share one more with you. It's called Wise Owl, is it? Let me just check. Yeah, this one. Wise Owl also has an online tutorial on VBA, but this can become a little difficult. But I mean, if you're asking, then I'll share this with you. This is a really good one. I think it's the right balance between being simple and covering complex topics. And they cover everything. Okay, so 90 videos are there. But this can get quite heavy, okay? So this is not something you can just, watch and be on your phone at the same time. You have to be completely attentive. You have to practice everything yourself. On their website, you can even download all the files that they have. And they explain everything really, really well, right from the absolute basics. Great. What else?
Hello.
Yes.
Sir, I had a problem in Excel. I actually need to share my screen. Should I?
I'll give you access. Just a moment. Yep.
Okay, so I've filtered this data.
Okay.
And the year is 1952 only.
Okay.
So if I select all this, it shows count as 142.
Okay.
But when I'm inserting it as a formula, it shows count to be 1693. Why is it?
Yeah, so no. So what happens is, and everybody, some of you might know this, but no, just come to the end. Come to the end. So what happens is that when you say to Excel that I want to find the count of B2 to B1694, it is counting all the cells that have a value in it. It is also counting the hidden rows. So you will have to change it to, just type it for me, equal to subtotal equal to subtotal. Open the parentheses. Now what do you want to find? You want to find the count. So select count, which is number 2. No, not enter. Never press enter in the middle of a formula. Always press tab. Once you select 2, just press tab or double click on it. Okay? Not 1, 2. Okay? Tab or double click, whichever one. Comma. Now select all the rows from 1694 till the top. Right? Enter.
Now it is.
Okay? So basically, this is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. What Excel says is that even if you have hidden some rows, they still exist. So they still give you the count or the sum of those rows. If you want to exclude them, then you have to use subtotal. Good. Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any questions? Let me quickly see the chart window. All right, I think we did a lot today. So we have worked on Power BI, we have done the average, we have done Tableau. I have shown you KNN. So that's some reading also that you have to do on KNN. Not a lot. I think maybe 1 hour should be enough on KNN. And remember, KNN is something where it will help you for the rest of your life. I mean, I've been working on KNN for 10 years and I still find it useful and it will continue to be there. It's a classic classification model. And obviously VBA. So maybe take out some time. You have an entire week with you. practice. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. If you have any question like this one, like the query that was just asked, just drop me a message or something, and I'll be more than happy to answer.
Thank you, sir. So I think today's session was very insightful, and most of us have learned something, new today. No, so there's a question in the chat box.
Can I talk about some drawbacks of Power BI that I have faced? See, I'm thinking. I can't think of anything off the top of my mind. I'm not saying it's a perfect tool, but I think some limitations or problems that I face is that animations. Power BI does not have animations, and that's a big challenge because Tableau has beautiful animations. And in Power BI, a lot of my clients tell me, Havish, can I animate this? And I unfortunately have to tell them, no, you can't. So I think that's something which I feel Power BI should definitely add. I don't know how they are going to. I mean, there are some basic animations, but mostly it doesn't work. So I think that's a big area where animations don't work. Other than that, I think the data cleaning is very powerful. Power BI is very fast as a tool. I mean, I can't really think of anything as such. Like in Tableau, I know that the biggest problem is that it's very difficult to learn. Power BI, on the other hand, is very simple to learn, right? I would not say that DAX is difficult. The topic is difficult, but when you start learning it, it starts to make some sense, right? I think Microsoft is doing a terrific job. You know, they have given you help. Like even when you go to Power BI, you will notice that. Let me share the screen as well. So if you notice here also, they have a help button and they have documentation available. They have videos available. So I think this is something where, see, Tableau has been around for 17 years. Power BI just completed 5 years. So despite the head start that Tableau has, I think Power BI has really done a great job. Definitely, I think animation is one thing where I really feel they should work very well. Another problem I felt is that when you look at these custom, sorry, I'll have to just copy this again. Just give me a moment. Right. So another problem that I have faced is that, and everybody faces this problem, all these custom visualizations that are there, sometimes they don't interact with the inbuilt visuals. I hope that makes sense. Like if you look at this one, this has been created by a company called Mac Software, right? Now the problem is that it will work very well, but when I try to connect it to one of my current inbuilt visualizations, it might not work very well. I think this is an area where Power BI really has to work at ensuring that third-party visualizations also work well. For example, the bullet chart has been created by Microsoft themselves. That's why it's worked. That is why it works properly. But if you look at a visual like, let's say, one moment. Anyone, let's say the attribute slicer. Actually, attribute is also here. Only one second. Maybe the ultimate decomposition tree. The problem is this has not been made by Microsoft. Hence, the problem is that they have not done a lot of debugging. So every now and then there'll be some errors. It might not work properly. You know, it's like the difference between Apple and Android. Tableau is more like Apple and Power BI is more like Android. So because Tableau is more like Apple, they make sure that everything that you're doing is very systematic and errors don't happen very frequently. Because Power BI is like Android, it means that anybody in the world can put anything on Power BI, but there is very little quality control. And you know, that's the reason errors and bugs also come very frequently. If you only use the inbuilt visuals, then there is no challenge. But if you use the visuals that you download, then there might be an issue that comes up. Yeah, that's the only two things I can think of. Can I do initial work on Power BI and then import a file? Oh, no, absolutely not. Ajinkya, see, you can only do the data cleaning, right? So you can clean the data on Power BI, then take it to Tableau and do the work. But you can't create a visualization on Power BI and then take it to Tableau. Once you create a visual on Power BI or on Tableau, then they are specific only to that particular application. You can't sort of use it between the two applications. There is no cross-platform support. In fact, there is zero cross-platform support. So there is no link between them. But yes, you can clean the data using Power Query, like I showed you, and then you can take the data to Tableau and create the visualization there. That can work as a process. In fact, that's something that I do sometimes as well. Right? Excellent. And just before all of you leave, if you're interested in doing a short course on Power BI and Tableau, some of you might have already done it, but especially for the first years, what you can do is you can just go to my channel. And if you notice, I have a 1-hour course on Power BI, this one, and I have a 45-minute course on Tableau, this one. And basically in this, I've covered all the important things. So you notice overview, table, maps, line, fact bubble, analytics, even calculated fields I've covered. Similarly, if you look at Power BI, I've covered everything here, right? So maybe this is something you can have a look at. Like I said earlier, this is a case study training, so we're not getting too much into the software as such. I'm speaking more about a business problem and how to solve it. But if you're interested in this, then maybe you can just watch these two as well. Excellent. Great. I think that would be all from my side. Thank you, everyone. And I will share the recording with you. I'll also share the macro file with you, and I'll share the updated Power BI file with you. The Tableau one I'm not sharing, but you can do that on your own. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me anytime during the week as well. And do definitely practice VBA a little bit, even if for 10, 15, 30 minutes, so that the next time when we continue, you have some clarity about it, right? Thanks, everyone.